Question 1. Risk assessment procedures indicate that the implementation of new Cisco collaboration applications may involve the handling of sensitive customer and employee data. Which of the following approaches best ensures compliance with data privacy and security regulations during the deployment phase? Option A. Conduct a thorough data privacy and security risk assessment specific to the chosen collaboration applications, and implement appropriate technical and organizational controls based on the findings before full deployment. Option B. Focus solely on enabling all collaboration features to maximize user adoption and productivity, deferring any detailed security or privacy reviews until after the initial rollout. Option C. Implement the collaboration applications with a primary focus on data residency requirements, without a comprehensive assessment of other potential privacy and security risks. Option D. Proceed with the deployment of the collaboration applications, relying on the vendor's standard security features, and assuming that default configurations are sufficient for regulatory compliance. Correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough data privacy and security risk assessment specific to the chosen collaboration applications, and implement appropriate technical and organizational controls based on the findings before full deployment. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between implementing new collaboration technologies and ensuring compliance with data privacy regulations. The need to balance enhanced communication and productivity with the safeguarding of sensitive user information requires careful judgment and a thorough understanding of applicable laws. The specific jurisdiction for the 300-810 CLICA exam is not explicitly stated, therefore. This explanation will adhere to general principles of data privacy and security commonly found in regulatory frameworks that would be relevant to implementing collaboration applications, such as those found in the United States, e.g., HIPAA for healthcare, COPPA for children's data, General Data Protection Principles, or the European Union, e.g., GDPR. The core challenge lies in configuring and deploying these applications in a manner that minimizes the risk of unauthorized access, data breaches, and non-compliance with data handling requirements. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a proactive, risk-based methodology. By conducting a thorough assessment of potential data privacy and security risks associated with the chosen collaboration applications, and then implementing appropriate technical and organizational controls, the organization demonstrates a commitment to regulatory compliance and ethical data stewardship. This aligns with the principle of privacy by design and security by design, which are fundamental to modern data protection regulations. It ensures that data protection is considered from the outset of the implementation, rather than as an afterthought. An incorrect approach that fails to conduct a comprehensive risk assessment before deployment is professionally unacceptable. This failure constitutes a significant regulatory and ethical lapse. It demonstrates a disregard for potential data privacy violations, which could lead to substantial fines, legal repercussions, and reputational damage. Specifically, it violates the spirit and often the letter of data protection laws that mandate due diligence in protecting personal information. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on feature enablement without considering data residency or access controls, is also professionally deficient. This oversight can lead to the inadvertent exposure of sensitive data to unauthorized individuals or jurisdictions, violating data localization requirements and potentially breaching confidentiality agreements. It reflects a lack of understanding of the broader implications of collaboration tool deployment beyond basic functionality. A third incorrect approach, relying solely on vendor default security settings without independent verification or customization, is equally problematic. While vendors often provide robust security, default configurations may not align with an organization's specific risk profile or regulatory obligations. This passive reliance can lead to security gaps and non-compliance, as the organization fails to exercise its due diligence in securing its data environment. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Identify all applicable data privacy and security regulations relevant to the organization and the type of data being handled. 2. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that identifies potential threats, vulnerabilities, and the impact of data breaches or privacy violations. 3. Evaluate collaboration application features and configurations against identified risks and regulatory requirements. 4. Implement technical controls, e.g., encryption, access controls, data loss prevention, and organizational policies, e.g., user training, data handling procedures to mitigate identified risks. 5. Regularly review and update security and privacy measures as technology evolves and regulations change. 6. Document all assessments, decisions, and implemented controls for audit and compliance purposes. Question 2. System analysis indicates that a large financial services firm is implementing a new Cisco collaboration platform. Different departments within the firm have varying requirements for data security, retention, and user access due to the sensitive nature of their work and regulatory obligations. Which approach best balances the need for a standardized, efficiently managed platform with the diverse needs of these departments while ensuring compliance with relevant financial regulations and data protection laws? Option A. Deploy the platform to each department independently, allowing each to configure it according to their specific perceived needs without central oversight. Option B. Implement the platform with default security and access controls across all departments, focusing on broad user adoption and minimal initial customization. Option C. Conduct a phased rollout, starting with a pilot group representing diverse departmental needs, to gather feedback and refine configurations before a full organizational deployment. Option D. Prioritize the deployment of the most advanced collaboration features to ensure the platform is future-proof, even if some features are not immediately utilized by all departments. The correct answer is B. Implement the platform with default security and access controls across all departments, focusing on broad user adoption and minimal initial customization. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in implementing collaboration solutions, where the technical capabilities of a platform must align with the diverse communication and data handling needs of different business units. The professional challenge lies in balancing standardization for efficiency and support with the specific, often unique, requirements of each department, particularly when those requirements touch upon sensitive data or regulatory compliance. Careful judgment is required to avoid over-provisioning, under-provisioning, or introducing security and compliance risks. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased rollout strategy, beginning with a pilot group that represents a cross-section of the organization's typical user base and their common collaboration needs. This allows for iterative feedback, identification of unforeseen issues, and refinement of configurations before a broader deployment. This approach aligns with best practices for change management and risk mitigation. From a regulatory perspective, especially within a framework like the UK's Data Protection Act 2018, DPA 2018, and the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR. If applicable, a phased approach allows for thorough testing of data handling, access controls, and audit trails in a controlled environment, ensuring compliance with data privacy principles and minimizing the risk of breaches or non-compliance during initial deployment. It also allows for the validation of security configurations against organizational policies and relevant industry standards. Incorrect approaches analysis. A big bang deployment across the entire organization without prior testing or pilot phases is professionally unsound. It significantly increases the risk of widespread disruption, technical failures, and user dissatisfaction. From a regulatory standpoint, this approach could lead to immediate non-compliance if data handling or security configurations are not correctly implemented from the outset, potentially exposing sensitive information and violating data protection laws. Deploying the solution with default configurations without any customization or consideration for specific departmental needs is also a failure. While it might seem efficient, it ignores the varied requirements of different business units, potentially leading to a solution that is not fit for purpose, hinders productivity, and may inadvertently create compliance gaps if certain departments have specific data handling or security mandates not met by defaults. This could violate principles of data minimization and purpose limitation under data protection regulations. Focusing solely on the most technically advanced features without assessing their necessity or impact on user adoption and existing workflows is another incorrect approach. This can lead to a complex system that is underutilized, difficult to support, and may not address the core collaboration needs of the majority of users. It also risks introducing unnecessary complexity that could obscure security settings or data access controls, potentially leading to accidental noncompliance. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured, risk-aware approach to implementing collaboration solutions. This involves understanding the business objectives, identifying all stakeholder groups and their specific needs, and mapping these to the technical capabilities of the chosen platform. A thorough assessment of regulatory requirements, including data privacy, security, and retention policies, is paramount. The decision-making process should prioritize a phased rollout, starting with pilot groups, to allow for testing, feedback, and iterative refinement. Continuous monitoring, user training, and post-implementation review are essential to ensure ongoing effectiveness and compliance. This systematic approach minimizes risk, maximizes user adoption, and ensures the solution meets both business and regulatory obligations. Question 3. Implementation of Cisco WebEx meetings and messaging for a US-based healthcare organization requires careful consideration of data privacy. Which approach best ensures compliance with relevant US regulations and protects sensitive patient information? Option A. Configure Cisco WebEx with end-to-end encryption for all sensitive communications, implement strong multi-factor authentication for all users, and establish a clear internal policy for handling and storing patient data within the platform, with regular user training on these policies. Option B. Utilize the default security settings of Cisco WebEx, assuming that the platform's general security features are sufficient for all types of organizational data. Option C. Implement basic password protection for all WebEx meetings and encourage users to be mindful of what information they share in messaging channels. Option D. Focus primarily on maximizing user adoption and feature utilization, with security and compliance being secondary considerations addressed only if specific incidents arise. The correct answer is A. Configure Cisco WebEx with end-to-end encryption for all sensitive communications, implement strong multi-factor authentication for all users, and establish a clear internal policy for handling and storing patient data within the platform, with regular user training on these policies. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in implementing collaboration applications, balancing the need for efficient communication and workflow with the imperative to adhere to data privacy regulations. Specifically, the CLICA exam focuses on implementing Cisco collaboration applications within a defined regulatory environment. For this question, we assume the jurisdiction is the United States, and therefore, relevant regulations include HIPAA, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, for healthcare-related data, and general data protection principles applicable to business communications. The professional challenge lies in ensuring that the chosen implementation strategy for Cisco WebEx meetings and messaging not only meets functional requirements, but also safeguards sensitive information from unauthorized access or disclosure, which could lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and loss of trust. The correct approach prioritizes data security and compliance by leveraging the built-in encryption and access control features of Cisco WebEx, coupled with a clear internal policy for data handling. This aligns with best professional practices by proactively mitigating risks associated with sensitive data transmission and storage. Adhering to HIPAA, for instance, requires robust technical safeguards to protect protected health information. 5. By configuring WebEx with end-to-end encryption, where applicable, and enforcing strong authentication, the organization demonstrates due diligence in protecting patient data, a critical ethical and legal obligation. This approach ensures that the implementation supports business objectives while remaining compliant with U.S. federal regulations governing data privacy. An incorrect approach that fails to implement robust encryption and access controls for sensitive communications would represent a significant regulatory and ethical failure. For example, relying solely on default security settings without specific configuration for sensitive data would violate the principle of least privilege and could expose PHI or other confidential information to unauthorized access, directly contravening HIPAA security rule. Another incorrect approach, such as neglecting to train users on secure communication practices, would also be ethically and regulatorily unsound. This oversight could lead to accidental data breaches through user error, such as sharing sensitive information in public channels or with external parties without proper authorization, thereby failing to meet the organizational responsibility for data protection. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a risk-based assessment. This means identifying the types of data that will be handled within the collaboration platform, understanding the specific regulatory requirements applicable to that data, e.g., HIPAA, GDPR if applicable to international operations, though for this exam we focus on US, and then selecting and configuring the collaboration tools to meet those requirements. This involves consulting with legal and compliance teams, performing thorough security reviews of the chosen applications, and establishing clear usage policies and training programs. The goal is to achieve a balance between functionality, usability, and robust security and compliance. Question 4. Operational review demonstrates a recurring alert indicating potential unauthorized access attempts to a user's collaboration data, specifically within their instant messaging history. The alert is flagged as medium severity and has been recurring for the past 48 hours. As the primary administrator responsible for the collaboration platform, you have the technical capability to directly access and review the content of these messages to verify the nature of the access attempts. Option A. Ignore the alert as it is marked as medium severity and has not yet resulted in a confirmed data breach. Option B. Immediately access the user's instant messaging history to investigate the nature of the access attempts and document your findings for further action. Option C. Temporarily disable the user's account to prevent any further potential unauthorized access until the issue can be thoroughly investigated. Option D. Escalate the alert to the dedicated security operations team, providing them with all relevant alert details and awaiting their guidance on further investigation steps. The correct answer is B. Immediately access the user's instant messaging history to investigate the nature of the access attempts and document your findings for further action. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the ethical obligation to maintain data privacy and security, particularly concerning sensitive collaboration data. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for troubleshooting with the long-term implications of unauthorized access and potential data breaches. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all actions taken are compliant with relevant regulations and uphold the trust placed in the IT professional. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it adheres strictly to established protocols for handling sensitive data and security incidents. By escalating the issue to the designated security team and following their guidance, the professional ensures that the investigation is conducted by individuals with the appropriate authority and expertise, minimizing the risk of further compromise. This aligns with the principles of data protection and incident response, mandated by regulatory frameworks that emphasize controlled access and authorized handling of sensitive information. An incorrect approach involving direct access to user collaboration data without explicit authorization or a documented incident response procedure constitutes a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This action bypasses established security controls and could lead to unauthorized disclosure of sensitive information, violating privacy regulations. It also undermines the principle of least privilege, where access to data should be limited to what is necessary for a specific role or task. Another incorrect approach, such as ignoring the alert due to perceived low impact, is also professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a disregard for potential security vulnerabilities and a failure to uphold the duty of care to protect organizational data. Such inaction could lead to a more severe security incident later, with significant legal and reputational consequences. It also fails to comply with regulatory requirements that often mandate timely reporting and remediation of security events. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of organizational policies, security best practices, and applicable regulations. When faced with a potential security issue, the professional should first assess the situation based on available information, consult relevant documentation, and then follow the established incident response plan. This typically involves reporting the incident to the appropriate authority, such as a security operations center or IT management, and awaiting their direction. Prioritizing data privacy, security, and compliance over expediency is paramount. Question 5. Process analysis reveals that a critical business unit requires immediate deployment of a new Cisco collaboration application to enhance remote team productivity. However, the organization operates under strict U.S. federal regulations concerning data privacy and security. The IT team is under pressure to deliver the solution within a tight deadline, and there is a temptation to expedite the deployment by skipping some of the more time-consuming security and compliance validation steps. What is the most professionally responsible approach to implementing this collaboration application? Option A. Conduct a phased deployment, starting with a pilot group, and perform thorough security and compliance testing against relevant U.S. federal regulations before a full rollout. Option B. Deploy the application to all users immediately to meet the business unit's urgent productivity needs, addressing security and compliance concerns post-deployment. Option C. Prioritize user experience enhancements during the initial deployment, deferring detailed security configuration and compliance validation to a later, less critical phase. Option D. Implement the application with only basic functional testing, assuming that the default security settings of the collaboration platform are sufficient for regulatory compliance. The correct answer is A. Conduct a phased deployment, starting with a pilot group, and perform thorough security and compliance testing against relevant U.S. federal regulations before a full rollout. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in implementing collaboration solutions, where the need for immediate functionality clashes with the requirement for thorough security and compliance validation. The pressure to deploy quickly, often driven by business demands or competitive pressures, can lead to shortcuts that compromise security postures. The professional challenge lies in balancing these competing priorities, ensuring that the deployed solution meets both functional and regulatory requirements without undue delay. This requires a deep understanding of the implications of each decision on data privacy, system integrity, and adherence to established security protocols. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes a phased deployment strategy that includes rigorous testing and validation against the specified regulatory framework before full integration. This aligns with best practices for implementing sensitive collaboration tools. By conducting a pilot deployment with a limited user group and thoroughly testing security controls, data handling policies, and compliance features against the 300-810 CLICA exams, implied regulatory context, which focuses on U.S. federal regulations for government and regulated industries, such as HIPAA and CMMC, if applicable to the exam scope. The organization can identify and remediate potential vulnerabilities or compliance gaps. This proactive approach ensures that the solution is not only functional, but also secure and compliant, minimizing the risk of data breaches, regulatory fines, and reputational damage. It demonstrates a commitment to responsible technology deployment and adherence to the principles of data protection and system security. Incorrect approach is analysis. Deploying the solution directly to all users without prior testing and validation against the regulatory framework is a significant failure. This bypasses critical security and compliance checks, exposing the organization to risks of data breaches, unauthorized access, and noncompliance with relevant U.S. federal regulations. Such an approach demonstrates a disregard for established security protocols and regulatory mandates, potentially leading to severe legal and financial repercussions. Implementing the solution with only basic functional testing, neglecting specific security configurations and compliance requirements, also represents a failure. While the system may appear to work from a user perspective, it could have underlying security weaknesses or fail to meet data handling and privacy mandates. This oversight can lead to inadvertent data exposure or noncompliance, even if the intention was to deploy quickly. Focusing solely on user experience improvements without verifying the underlying security and compliance mechanisms is another professionally unacceptable approach. User experience is important, but it cannot come at the expense of security and regulatory adherence. A solution that is user-friendly but insecure or non-compliant poses a greater long-term risk to the organization and its stakeholders. Professional reasoning. Professionals faced with such scenarios should adopt a risk-based approach. This involves identifying potential risks associated with each deployment option, assessing their likelihood and impact, and prioritizing mitigation strategies. A structured decision-making process would include 1. Clearly defining the functional and non-functional security, compliance, requirements based on business needs and regulatory obligations. 2. Evaluating different deployment strategies against these requirements, considering the trade-offs between speed, cost, and risk. 3. Engaging relevant stakeholders, including IT security, legal, and compliance teams, to ensure all perspectives are considered. 4. Documenting the decision-making process and the rationale behind the chosen approach. 5. Implementing robust monitoring and auditing mechanisms post-deployment to ensure ongoing compliance and security. Question 6. Stakeholder feedback indicates that users are experiencing intermittent failures when attempting to share their screen during Cisco WebEx meetings hosted within the organization's controlled environment. While some users report success, others consistently encounter an error message stating, "Screen sharing is not permitted by policy." The IT team has not recently implemented any explicit policy changes related to screen sharing. What is the most appropriate initial course of action for the collaboration engineer? Option A. Inform stakeholders that the screen sharing is not permitted by policy. Message is a generic error and likely indicates a user-specific issue with their local machine's graphics drivers. Option B. Immediately advise users to disable their VPN connection before joining meetings, as VPNs are often known to interfere with screen sharing features. Option C. Initiate a detailed investigation into the WebEx site configuration, user group policies, and network firewall rules that might be inadvertently blocking or restricting screen sharing functionality for specific users or groups. Option D. Recommend that all users upgrade to the latest version of the WebEx desktop application, as older versions are sometimes prone to screen sharing bugs. The correct answer is C. Initiate a detailed investigation into the WebEx site configuration, user group policies, and network firewall rules that might be inadvertently blocking or restricting screen sharing functionality for specific users or groups. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between user-perceived functionality and the underlying technical limitations and security implications of a collaboration platform. The challenge lies in managing stakeholder expectations, ensuring compliance with security policies, and delivering a functional solution that meets business needs without compromising data integrity or user privacy. Careful judgment is required to balance these competing demands. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough, documented investigation of the reported issue. This involves engaging with the stakeholders to gather detailed information, replicating the reported behavior, and consulting relevant Cisco documentation and best practices for the CLICA exam-specified jurisdiction. This methodical approach ensures that the root cause is accurately identified, whether it's a configuration error, a software bug, or a misunderstanding of intended functionality. By following a structured troubleshooting process, the engineer can provide a technically sound and defensible solution, adhering to the principles of due diligence and professional responsibility. This aligns with the implicit regulatory expectation of competent and responsible IT service delivery, ensuring that implemented solutions are secure, reliable, and meet defined requirements. An incorrect approach that immediately suggests a workaround without proper investigation is professionally unacceptable. This bypasses the critical step of understanding the problem's origin. If the issue is a security vulnerability, implementing a workaround could inadvertently expose the organization to risks, violating implicit regulatory requirements for data protection and system security. Furthermore, it fails to address the underlying cause, potentially leading to recurring problems and increased support costs. Another incorrect approach, such as blaming the end users for misconfiguration without evidence, is unprofessional and counterproductive. It erodes trust and hinders collaboration. Ethically, it is important to approach troubleshooting with an open mind and a focus on problem solving, rather than assigning blame prematurely. This approach also risks overlooking genuine technical issues that may be present. Finally, proposing a complete system overhaul as the first step is an inefficient and potentially costly solution. While sometimes necessary, it should be a last resort after all other diagnostic and remediation options have been exhausted. This approach fails to demonstrate a commitment to efficient resource utilization and may not be justifiable without a clear understanding of the problem's scope and impact. It also risks introducing new, unforeseen issues. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured problem-solving methodology. This includes clearly defining the problem, gathering information from all relevant sources, stakeholders, logs, documentation, formulating hypotheses, testing those hypotheses systematically, implementing solutions based on validated findings, and verifying the effectiveness of the solution. Throughout this process, maintaining clear and transparent communication with stakeholders is paramount. Adherence to established IT best practices and the specific guidelines relevant to the CLICA exam's jurisdiction is essential for ensuring compliance and professional integrity. Question 7. Investigation of a healthcare organization's implementation of a new Cisco collaboration platform reveals that the chosen solution allows for the sharing of patient-related documents and direct messaging between medical staff. The IT team is prioritizing rapid deployment to improve interdepartmental communication. Which of the following implementation strategies best aligns with regulatory requirements for handling sensitive patient information in the United States? Option A. Deploying the platform with default security settings and providing users with a general overview of data privacy best practices. Option B. Prioritizing features that enhance user experience and collaboration efficiency, assuming that any security concerns can be addressed post-deployment. Option C. Relying on the vendor's stated compliance with general data protection principles without specific verification for healthcare data. Option D. Implementing the platform with end-to-end encryption for all communications and document sharing, configuring granular access controls based on user roles, and ensuring comprehensive audit logging for all activities. The correct answer is A. Deploying the platform with default security settings and providing users with a general overview of data privacy best practices. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in implementing collaboration applications, balancing the need for efficient communication and workflow optimization with the imperative to comply with data privacy regulations. Specifically, the CLICA exam focuses on implementing Cisco collaboration applications within a defined regulatory environment. For this exam, we will assume the jurisdiction is the United States, and therefore, relevant regulations include the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, for healthcare-related data, and the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, COPPA, if applicable to the user base. General data protection principles under the Federal Trade Commission, FTC, Act also apply. The professional challenge lies in identifying and mitigating risks associated with the collection, storage, and transmission of sensitive information through collaboration tools. A failure to do so can result in significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. Careful judgment is required to select solutions that not only meet functional requirements, but also adhere to these legal and ethical obligations. The correct approach prioritizes a thorough understanding of the data types being handled by the collaboration application and the specific regulatory requirements governing that data. This involves conducting a comprehensive risk assessment and implementing appropriate technical and organizational safeguards. For instance, if the collaboration application is used to transmit protected health information, ensuring end-to-end encryption, access controls, and audit trails that align with HIPAA security rule is paramount. This proactive and compliance-driven approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the legal and ethical obligations of the organization, minimizing the risk of breaches and non-compliance. It demonstrates a commitment to data security and privacy, which is a fundamental ethical responsibility and a legal requirement. An incorrect approach might involve implementing a solution based solely on feature set and cost, without adequately considering the regulatory implications. For example, choosing a collaboration tool that does not offer robust encryption for sensitive communications or lacks granular access controls would be a regulatory failure under HIPAA if PHI is involved. Another incorrect approach could be to assume that all cloud-based collaboration tools are inherently compliant, neglecting the shared responsibility model and the need for specific configurations and policies to ensure compliance. This assumption is an ethical failure, as it demonstrates a lack of due diligence in protecting user data and a disregard for legal obligations. Furthermore, deploying a solution without proper user training on data handling policies and security best practices can lead to accidental data exposure, constituting a failure to implement adequate organizational safeguards, which is a violation of regulatory frameworks. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Identify the specific regulatory framework applicable to the data being handled and the organization's operations. 2. Conduct a thorough risk assessment to understand potential vulnerabilities and threats to data privacy and security. 3. Evaluate collaboration application solutions based on their ability to meet both functional requirements and regulatory compliance mandates. 4. Implement technical controls, e.g., encryption, access controls, logging, and organizational policies, e.g., data handling procedures, user training to mitigate identified risks. 5. Regularly review and update security measures and compliance practices to adapt to evolving threats and regulatory changes. Question 8. What factors determine the appropriate level of security controls for Cisco WebEx features, considering U.S. federal regulations and industry best practices for data privacy and integrity in a corporate environment? Option A. The cost of implementing additional security features, with the primary goal being to minimize expenditure on security measures. Option B. The personal preference of the IT security manager for specific encryption algorithms, without a formal risk assessment. Option C. The sensitivity of the data being shared, the specific regulatory compliance obligations, e.g., HIPAA, CMMC, GDPR if applicable to U.S. operations, and the potential impact of a security breach on the organization and its stakeholders. Option D. The desire to implement the most advanced security features available in Cisco WebEx, regardless of user impact or specific data sensitivity. The correct answer is C. The sensitivity of the data being shared, the specific regulatory compliance obligations, e.g., HIPAA, CMMC, GDPR if applicable to U.S. operations, and the potential impact of a security breach on the organization and its stakeholders. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in implementing collaboration solutions, balancing user experience and security requirements within a defined regulatory framework. The professional challenge lies in interpreting and applying the specific requirements of the 300-810 CLICA exam's jurisdiction, which for this context is assumed to be the United States, focusing on relevant U.S. federal regulations and industry best practices applicable to collaboration technologies. The need for careful judgment arises from the potential impact on both user productivity and compliance. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a risk-based assessment aligned with U.S. regulatory principles, such as those found in NIST guidelines, and potentially HIPAA if health information is involved, or other sector-specific regulations. This approach ensures that security measures are proportionate to the identified risks, avoiding unnecessary user friction while maintaining a robust security posture. It demonstrates an understanding of the principle of least privilege and the importance of data protection, which are cornerstones of U.S. cybersecurity regulations. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on implementing the most restrictive security settings without a corresponding risk assessment fails to meet the spirit of efficient and effective technology deployment. It can lead to user frustration, workarounds that bypass intended security, and ultimately, reduced productivity, which is not a sustainable or professional outcome. This approach might also violate principles of usability and proportionality, often implicitly expected in regulatory guidance. Another incorrect approach that neglects to consider the specific data handling requirements mandated by U.S. regulations, such as those governing personally identifiable information, PI, or protected health information, FI, is a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This could lead to data breaches, non-compliance penalties, and reputational damage. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence in understanding the sensitive nature of the data being transmitted and stored. A further incorrect approach that overlooks the need for user training and clear communication about security policies creates a vulnerability. Users who are unaware of or do not understand security protocols are more likely to make mistakes that compromise the system. This failure to educate users is a common pitfall that can undermine even the most well-designed technical security measures and is often a point of emphasis in regulatory compliance audits. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, thoroughly understand the specific regulatory landscape applicable to the organization and the data being handled. Second, conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify potential threats and vulnerabilities. Third, design and implement security controls that are proportionate to the identified risks, considering both technical measures and user education. Finally, establish a process for ongoing monitoring, review, and adaptation of security policies and controls to address evolving threats and regulatory changes. Question 9. When evaluating the implementation of Cisco WebEx for secure team collaboration and considering the need to protect sensitive project discussions and shared documents, which approach best aligns with the principles of data protection and compliance within the specified regulatory framework for this exam. Option A. Implementing end-to-end encryption for all team messages and file sharing, coupled with role-based access controls that restrict access to sensitive spaces and content based on user responsibilities. Option B. Enabling basic security features like password protection for meetings and ensuring that all users have access to all team spaces to foster open communication. Option C. Relying solely on network-level security measures, such as firewalls and VPNs, to protect all collaboration traffic, assuming that application-level encryption is not strictly mandated for all content. Option D. Implementing transport layer security (TLS) for all WebEx traffic and conducting regular security awareness training for all users, without specific encryption for sensitive content within the application. The correct answer is A. Implementing end-to-end encryption for all team messages and file sharing, coupled with role-based access controls that restrict access to sensitive spaces and content based on user responsibilities. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in implementing collaboration solutions, balancing user experience and security requirements within a defined regulatory framework. The professional challenge lies in understanding how to implement security features without unduly hindering legitimate collaboration, while ensuring compliance with the specific regulations governing data handling and communication within the exam's jurisdiction. Careful judgment is required to select the most appropriate security posture that aligns with both technical capabilities and legal obligations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a layered security strategy that is both effective and compliant. By implementing end-to-end encryption for sensitive communications and employing granular access controls based on user roles and data sensitivity, the solution adheres to principles of data protection and privacy. This approach ensures that confidential information remains secure while allowing authorized users to collaborate efficiently. It demonstrates a proactive stance on security and compliance, which is a hallmark of professional responsibility in IT implementation. An incorrect approach that fails to implement end-to-end encryption for sensitive data, even if other security measures are in place, creates a vulnerability. This could lead to a breach of confidential information, violating regulations that mandate the protection of sensitive data in transit and at rest. Another incorrect approach that relies solely on network-level security without considering application-level encryption for sensitive content is also problematic. Network security can be bypassed, leaving data exposed. Failing to implement granular access controls, allowing broad access to sensitive collaboration spaces, is a significant ethical and regulatory failure, as it increases the risk of unauthorized disclosure and misuse of information, potentially violating data privacy laws. Professionals should approach such situations by first thoroughly understanding the specific regulatory requirements applicable to the data being handled and the communication channels being used. This involves identifying what constitutes sensitive information according to the relevant laws. Subsequently, they should assess the technical capabilities of the collaboration platform to implement security controls that meet these requirements. A risk-based approach, prioritizing the protection of the most sensitive data and communications, is crucial. This involves a continuous cycle of assessment, implementation, and review to ensure ongoing compliance and security. Question 10. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a new third-party application, intended to enhance team collaboration by integrating with Cisco WebEx, requires careful evaluation before deployment. Which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory compliance and robust security posture for this integration? Option A. Conduct a thorough impact assessment that scrutinizes the application's data handling, security controls, and alignment with applicable data privacy regulations and internal security policies. Option B. Implement the integration immediately to meet user demand, deferring any formal security or compliance review until after deployment. Option C. Proceed with the integration based on positive feedback from a pilot user group regarding the application's functionality and ease of use. Option D. Accept the third-party vendor's assurances of compliance with relevant industry standards and data protection laws without independent verification. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough impact assessment that scrutinizes the application's data handling, security controls, and alignment with applicable data privacy regulations and internal security policies. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in implementing collaboration applications, balancing the need for robust security and compliance with the user demand for seamless integration and accessibility. Professional challenge lies in identifying the most effective and compliant method for integrating a third-party application into the existing Cisco collaboration ecosystem, ensuring that data privacy and regulatory requirements are met without unduly hindering business operations. The inherent tension between security mandates and user experience necessitates a thorough impact assessment that considers technical, operational, and regulatory facets. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that specifically evaluates the proposed third-party application against the established security policies and relevant regulatory frameworks applicable to the organization's operating jurisdiction. This assessment should meticulously document the application's data handling practices, its integration points with Cisco collaboration tools, potential vulnerabilities, and its compliance posture with data privacy laws. By prioritizing a detailed technical and security review, the organization ensures that any integration aligns with its risk tolerance and legal obligations, thereby safeguarding sensitive information and maintaining regulatory adherence. This proactive evaluation is a cornerstone of responsible IT governance and risk management. Incorrect approach is analysis. Proceeding with integration based solely on user-reported functionality or perceived ease of use represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Such an approach bypasses critical security and compliance checks, potentially exposing the organization to data breaches, privacy violations, and non-compliance penalties. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for established risk management protocols. Similarly, relying on the third-party vendor's self-attestation of compliance without independent verification is insufficient. Regulatory frameworks often require demonstrable proof of compliance, not just claims. This approach neglects the organization's responsibility to ensure its technology stack adheres to legal and ethical standards, creating a blind spot for potential risks. Finally, implementing the integration without any formal impact assessment, assuming it will be fine, is the most egregious failure. This abdicates the organization's responsibility for risk management and compliance, leaving it vulnerable to unforeseen consequences and potential legal repercussions. Professional reasoning. Professionals must adopt a structured, risk-based approach to technology integration. This involves 1. Clearly defining the scope of the integration and its potential impact on data, systems, and users. 2. Identifying all relevant regulatory and policy requirements that govern the data and communication channels involved. 3. Conducting a thorough technical and security assessment of the third-party application, including its data flow, access controls, and vulnerability management. 4. Documenting the findings of the impact assessment and developing a risk mitigation plan for any identified issues. 5. Obtaining appropriate approvals based on the documented risk assessment and mitigation strategies before proceeding with implementation. This systematic process ensures that decisions are informed, compliant, and aligned with the organization's overall security and business objectives. Question 11. Operational review demonstrates that a company is planning to deploy a new Cisco collaboration feature that promises enhanced real-time communication capabilities. However, the IT security team has raised concerns about potential integration conflicts with existing security protocols and the need for comprehensive user training before widespread adoption. The project manager is eager to roll out the feature quickly to capitalize on its perceived benefits. Considering the principles of implementing Cisco collaboration applications, which of the following approaches best balances security, functionality, and user adoption? Option A. Deploy the new feature immediately to all users to maximize its benefits, with a plan to address any security issues or user confusion as they arise. Option B. Implement the new feature with minimal security checks, prioritizing rapid deployment, and assuming that any security risks will be managed through post-deployment monitoring and reactive measures. Option C. Defer the deployment of the new feature indefinitely until all potential security vulnerabilities and integration challenges can be completely eliminated, even if it means delaying the adoption of beneficial technology. Option D. Implement the new feature in a phased manner, starting with a pilot group, while simultaneously developing and delivering targeted user training and conducting thorough security testing to ensure compatibility with existing protocols. Correct answer is D. Implement the new feature in a phased manner, starting with a pilot group, while simultaneously developing and delivering targeted user training and conducting thorough security testing to ensure compatibility with existing protocols. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in implementing collaboration solutions, balancing the need for robust security with user accessibility and the efficient deployment of new features. The professional challenge lies in interpreting and applying the relevant Cisco collaboration applications, CLICA, implementation guidelines, which implicitly require adherence to best practices for secure and effective communication systems. The core of the difficulty is understanding how to prioritize security controls without unduly hindering legitimate user access or the adoption of new functionalities, all within the context of a typical enterprise environment. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a phased, risk-based implementation. This aligns with the CLICA objectives of ensuring reliable and secure collaboration. By first establishing a baseline security posture and then incrementally introducing new features with thorough testing and user training, the organization minimizes the risk of introducing vulnerabilities or disrupting existing workflows. This methodical approach is ethically sound, as it protects the integrity of the communication system and the data it handles, while also respecting user needs through planned adoption. Regulatory compliance, though not explicitly detailed in the CLICA syllabus as a specific jurisdiction's law, is inherently addressed by implementing secure and reliable systems that prevent unauthorized access and data breaches, which are common concerns in any regulatory environment. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate feature deployment without adequate security vetting is professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for the potential for new features to introduce security gaps or conflicts with existing security policies. Such an approach risks exposing the organization to security breaches, data loss, and service disruptions, which could have significant financial and reputational consequences. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of due diligence in protecting organizational assets and user data. Another incorrect approach, which involves over-engineering security to the point of severely limiting user functionality, is also professionally problematic. While security is paramount, collaboration tools are designed to facilitate communication and productivity. An overly restrictive security model can lead to user frustration, workarounds that bypass security, and ultimately, a failure to realize the benefits of the collaboration investment. This approach fails to strike a balance and can be seen as an abdication of the responsibility to enable effective collaboration. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of the CLICA implementation principles, a risk assessment of proposed changes, and a clear communication strategy with stakeholders. Professionals should always consider the impact of their decisions on security, user experience, and overall business objectives. A phased rollout, coupled with comprehensive testing and user education, is a robust framework for making sound decisions in complex IT implementation scenarios. Question 12. The assessment process reveals that a healthcare organization is implementing Cisco WebEx for internal team collaboration and external patient communication. The IT team is concerned about ensuring that sensitive patient health information, FI, transmitted via WebEx messages and calls remains compliant with U.S. federal regulations. Which of the following implementation strategies best addresses the regulatory requirements for protecting PHI? Option A. Enable end-to-end encryption for all WebEx messages and calls, and configure WebEx to store message history for a minimum of 6 years to comply with healthcare record retention policies. Option B. Configure WebEx to allow all users to share their screens and files freely during meetings to facilitate collaboration, and assume that any PHI shared will be handled responsibly by individual users. Option C. Implement WebEx with basic authentication and access controls, and advise users to avoid discussing PHI in chat messages, focusing primarily on call quality for external patient interactions. Option D. Deploy WebEx with default security settings and rely on user training to ensure that PHI is not shared inappropriately, assuming that most communication is not sensitive. The correct answer is A. Enable end-to-end encryption for all WebEx messages and calls, and configure WebEx to store message history for a minimum of 6 years to comply with healthcare record retention policies. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge in implementing collaboration applications, ensuring secure and compliant communication across diverse user groups and devices. The scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for functional collaboration with the long-term imperative of data privacy and regulatory adherence. Missteps can lead to data breaches, compliance violations, and erosion of user trust, all of which have significant financial and reputational consequences. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a proactive, layered security strategy that aligns with the principles of data protection and privacy by design. This involves understanding the specific data being transmitted, the relevant regulatory requirements, in this case, implicitly U.S. federal regulations governing data privacy and security, as the exam is U.S.-centric, and implementing technical controls that enforce these requirements at the application and network levels. This approach demonstrates a commitment to responsible technology deployment and safeguards sensitive information. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on rapid deployment without considering data classification and encryption fails to meet regulatory obligations. For instance, transmitting sensitive information without appropriate encryption would violate data privacy laws that mandate protection of personally identifiable information, PI, or protected health information, FI, during transit. Another incorrect approach, such as relying on user-based security policies alone without robust technical enforcement, is insufficient. This creates a significant security gap, as user adherence to policies can be inconsistent, leading to accidental or intentional data exposure, which is a direct contravention of security best practices and regulatory expectations for data protection. A third incorrect approach, neglecting to audit and monitor communication logs for compliance, leaves the organization vulnerable to undetected breaches and makes it impossible to demonstrate due diligence in the event of an incident, violating audit trail requirements often mandated by regulatory frameworks. Professional reasoning in such situations requires a systematic approach. First, identify the types of data being handled by the collaboration application and the sensitivity of that data. Second, determine the applicable regulatory framework and its specific requirements for data handling, transmission, and storage. Third, design and implement technical controls, such as encryption, access controls, and secure configurations, that directly address these requirements. Fourth, establish clear policies and provide training to users. Finally, implement ongoing monitoring and auditing to ensure continued compliance and identify potential security risks. This structured decision-making process ensures that technical solutions are not only functional, but also secure and compliant. Question 13. The risk matrix shows a high likelihood of unauthorized access to sensitive customer communication data within the Cisco Unified Communications Manager, CLICA, environment due to a recent phishing campaign targeting administrative credentials. Which of the following actions represents the most effective and professionally sound approach to mitigate this immediate threat and prevent future occurrences? Option A. Temporarily disable all administrative access to CLICA while a full forensic investigation is conducted to identify the extent of the breach. Option B. Perform a system-wide password reset for all administrative accounts and schedule a review of the password policy for future implementation. Option C. Immediately enforce multi-factor authentication for all administrative access to CLICA. Conduct a comprehensive audit of administrative accounts for suspicious activity and revoke any compromised credentials. Option D. Update the CLICA firewall rules to block all IP addresses identified as originating from the recent phishing campaign. The correct answer is C. Immediately enforce multi-factor authentication for all administrative access to CLICA. Conduct a comprehensive audit of administrative accounts for suspicious activity, and revoke any compromised credentials. Explanation. The risk matrix shows a high likelihood of unauthorized access to sensitive customer communication data within the Cisco Unified Communications Manager, CLICA, environment due to a recent phishing campaign targeting administrative credentials. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires immediate action to mitigate a significant security threat that could lead to data breaches, regulatory fines, and reputational damage. The challenge lies in balancing the urgency of remediation with the need to maintain service availability and adhere to established security protocols. The correct approach involves implementing a multi-layered security strategy focused on immediate threat containment and long-term vulnerability reduction. This includes enforcing multi-factor authentication, MFA, for all administrative access to CLICA, conducting a thorough audit of all administrative accounts for suspicious activity, and immediately revoking any compromised credentials. Furthermore, implementing stricter access control lists, ACL, and network segmentation for CLICA infrastructure aligns with best practices for protecting critical collaboration systems. This approach is best professional practice because it directly addresses the identified vulnerability, unauthorized access, with robust security controls that are standard in the industry for protecting sensitive data and complying with data privacy regulations. The focus on MFA and access control is a direct application of the principle of least privilege and defense in depth, which are foundational to secure IT operations. An incorrect approach would be to solely rely on a password reset for all administrative accounts without implementing MFA. This fails to address the root cause of the vulnerability, which is the susceptibility of single-factor authentication to phishing attacks. It also neglects the need for ongoing monitoring and auditing, leaving the system exposed to future similar attacks. This approach represents a regulatory failure by not adequately protecting sensitive customer data as required by data privacy laws, and an ethical failure by not taking sufficient steps to prevent harm to users whose data could be compromised. Another incorrect approach would be to disable all administrative access temporarily to investigate, without a clear plan for restoration or alternative communication methods. While investigation is important, such a drastic measure without a defined rollback strategy or contingency plan can lead to significant service disruption, impacting business operations and potentially violating service-level agreements, SLAs. This is professionally unsound as it prioritizes containment over operational continuity without a balanced strategy. A third incorrect approach would be to only update the firewall rules to block known malicious IP addresses from the phishing campaign. While this might offer some immediate protection, it is a reactive measure that does not address the compromised credentials or the underlying vulnerability in authentication. Phishing campaigns evolve, and relying solely on IP blocking is insufficient for comprehensive security. This approach is a regulatory failure as it does not provide a robust enough security posture to protect sensitive data, and an ethical failure as it leaves the system vulnerable to other attack vectors. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a rapid risk assessment, followed by the implementation of immediate containment measures, a thorough investigation, and then the deployment of long-term preventative controls. This process should be guided by established security frameworks and regulatory requirements, ensuring that all actions are documented and that communication with stakeholders is clear and timely. The focus should always be on a balanced approach that prioritizes security, service availability, and compliance. Question 14. The monitoring system demonstrates a consistent pattern of an employee repeatedly accessing and downloading sensitive project documentation outside of standard business hours, with no clear business justification evident in their calendar or project management tools. Option A. Alert the employee's direct manager about the observed activity and request they address it with the employee directly without further investigation. Option B. Initiate a formal investigation by gathering all relevant logs and audit trails, then schedule a meeting with the employee to discuss the observed activity and seek their explanation before any conclusions are drawn or actions are taken. Option C. Ignore the findings, as the employee is a long-standing and trusted member of the team, and assume there is a benign reason. Option D. Immediately report the employee to HR for potential policy violation and data exfiltration, assuming the activity is malicious. The correct answer is B. Initiate a formal investigation by gathering all relevant logs and audit trails, then schedule a meeting with the employee to discuss the observed activity and seek their explanation before any conclusions are drawn or actions are taken. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between the need for effective collaboration tool management and the privacy expectations of users. Implementing Cisco collaboration applications, CLICA, involves deploying systems that can generate and store sensitive communication data. The ethical dilemma arises when the monitoring system reveals patterns that could be interpreted as misuse, but the exact intent or context of that misuse is not immediately clear. A responsible IT professional must balance the organization's need to ensure compliance and security with the individual rights of employees. The correct approach, which involves a multi-step process of investigation and communication, represents best professional practice. It aligns with general principles of data privacy and fair employment practices, which are often underpinned by organizational policies and, in many jurisdictions, by broader legal frameworks that protect employee privacy. Specifically, this approach prioritizes gathering objective evidence, understanding the context, and providing the individual an opportunity to explain their actions before any disciplinary measures are taken. This respects due process and avoids premature judgment. An incorrect approach would be to immediately report the observed pattern as definitive misuse without further investigation. This fails to acknowledge that the observed behavior might have a legitimate, albeit unusual, business purpose, or that the monitoring system's interpretation might be flawed. Such an action could lead to unfair accusations, damage employee trust, and potentially violate privacy regulations if the monitoring itself is not conducted in accordance with established policies and legal requirements. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the findings entirely. This abdicates responsibility for maintaining a secure and compliant collaboration environment. It could expose the organization to risks if the observed pattern indeed represents a significant security vulnerability or a violation of company policy. This failure to act can have serious repercussions for the organization and its data. A third incorrect approach is to immediately escalate to disciplinary action based solely on the monitoring system's output. This bypasses crucial steps of investigation and communication, leading to a potentially unjust outcome. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the employee's right to be heard and to have their actions understood in context. The professional reasoning process for such situations should involve 1. Understanding the organization's acceptable use policies and any relevant data privacy regulations. 2. Verifying the accuracy and context of the monitoring system's findings. 3. Gathering additional objective information to corroborate or refute the initial observation. 4. Engaging with the individual involved to understand their perspective and intent. 5. Making a decision based on a comprehensive understanding of the facts, policies, and potential consequences. 6. Documenting all steps taken and decisions made. Question 15. The audit findings indicate that the newly deployed Cisco WebEx meeting solution is not adequately configured to manage user data residency requirements, potentially exposing the organization to non-compliance with data protection regulations. Which of the following implementation strategies best addresses this audit finding from a regulatory compliance perspective? Option A. Configure WebEx meetings to store all meeting recordings and chat logs within the organization's primary data center located in the United States, ensuring all users are informed of this policy via an internal memo. Option B. Implement WebEx meetings with a global data storage policy, allowing Cisco to determine the optimal storage location for user data based on performance, without explicit user consent for cross-border data transfers. Option C. Deploy WebEx meetings with default settings that prioritize ease of use and rapid deployment, assuming that Cisco's standard data handling practices are compliant with all applicable regulations without further verification. Option D. Configure WebEx meetings to allow users to select their preferred data residency region during account setup, and ensure all meeting recordings and chat logs are stored in the user-selected region, with clear consent mechanisms for data processing. The correct answer is A. Configure WebEx meetings to store all meeting recordings and chat logs within the organization's primary data center located in the United States, ensuring all users are informed of this policy via an internal memo. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential breach of data privacy regulations due to the implementation of a new collaboration application without adequate consideration for data residency and user consent mechanisms. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the technical implementation of collaboration tools with stringent legal and ethical obligations concerning sensitive user information. The pressure to deploy new features quickly can sometimes overshadow the critical need for compliance, leading to significant risks. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough understanding and adherence to the relevant regulatory framework, which in this context, for the 300 810 CLICA exam, would align with general principles of data protection and privacy as understood within common regulatory landscapes that Cisco's products operate within, such as GDPR-like principles or similar national data protection laws. This involves proactively identifying data types, their intended use, storage locations, and ensuring explicit user consent is obtained where required, especially for data that might be processed or stored across different geographical boundaries. Implementing robust access controls and encryption further mitigates risks. This proactive, compliance-first approach minimizes legal exposure, builds user trust, and ensures the long-term viability of the collaboration solution. An incorrect approach that fails to address data residency requirements by assuming all data can be stored in a single, unspecified location is professionally unacceptable. It overlooks potential legal obligations that mandate data be kept within specific jurisdictions or require explicit user consent for cross-border data transfers. Such a failure can lead to significant fines, reputational damage, and loss of user confidence, directly violating data protection principles. Another incorrect approach that bypasses obtaining explicit user consent for the collection and processing of personal data, particularly sensitive information, is also professionally unacceptable. This directly contravenes ethical data handling practices and legal requirements that grant individuals control over their personal information. It exposes the organization to legal action and erodes trust. A third incorrect approach that neglects to implement appropriate security measures, such as encryption for data at rest and in transit, leaves sensitive collaboration data vulnerable to unauthorized access or breaches. This is a failure in due diligence and a violation of the duty of care to protect user data, which is a fundamental ethical and often legal requirement. The professional reasoning process for such situations should involve a risk-based assessment that integrates compliance requirements from the outset of any technology implementation. This means consulting with legal and compliance teams early, understanding the data lifecycle, mapping data flows, and ensuring that technical solutions are designed with privacy and security as core tenets, not as afterthoughts. Prioritizing user rights and regulatory adherence over expediency is paramount. Question 16. Compliance review shows that the IT department is planning to implement several new Cisco WebEx collaboration features, including advanced meeting recording and transcription services, and integrated chat functionalities with external guest access. The team has not yet conducted any formal privacy impact assessments or reviewed the specific data handling practices of these new features in relation to the UK's Data Protection Act 2018. What is the most appropriate next step to ensure compliance? Option A. Rely on the existing general IT security policies to govern the use of the new WebEx features, without conducting a specific review of their privacy implications. Option B. Immediately initiate a Data Protection Impact Assessment (DPIA) to identify and mitigate potential privacy risks associated with the new WebEx features before deployment. Option C. Proceed with the deployment of the WebEx features, assuming that Cisco's standard security and privacy controls are sufficient for compliance with UK data protection laws. Option D. Deploy the WebEx features and plan to address any privacy concerns that arise after the implementation is complete. The correct answer is B. Immediately initiate a Data Protection Impact Assessment (DPIA) to identify and mitigate potential privacy risks associated with the new WebEx features before deployment. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between implementing new collaboration features and ensuring compliance with data privacy regulations. The challenge lies in balancing the benefits of enhanced communication and productivity offered by Cisco WebEx features with the legal and ethical obligations to protect user data. Careful judgment is required to avoid potential breaches, fines, and reputational damage. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough understanding of the applicable regulatory framework, specifically the UK's Data Protection Act 2018, DPA 2018, and the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, as retained in UK law. By conducting a Data Protection Impact Assessment (DPIA) before deployment, the IT team demonstrates a proactive commitment to identifying and mitigating privacy risks associated with the new WebEx features. This aligns with the principles of data protection by design and by default, ensuring that privacy considerations are embedded into the implementation process from the outset. This approach is ethically sound as it respects user privacy rights and legally compliant by adhering to the requirements of the DPA 2018. An incorrect approach that involves deploying the WebEx features without a formal risk assessment or understanding of data handling practices would be professionally unacceptable. This failure to conduct a DPA, or equivalent risk assessment, directly contravenes the spirit and letter of the DPA 2018, which mandates such assessments for high-risk processing activities. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for user privacy and could lead to unauthorized access or misuse of sensitive information. Another incorrect approach, which is to assume that Cisco's standard security features are sufficient without independent verification and contextualization to the organization's specific data processing activities, is also professionally unsound. While Cisco provides robust security, the organization remains the data controller and is ultimately responsible for ensuring compliance. Relying solely on vendor assurances without due diligence can lead to regulatory noncompliance if the implementation or usage patterns introduce unforeseen privacy risks. This approach fails to uphold the principle of accountability under the DPA 2018. A further incorrect approach, which is to delay the privacy review until after the features are in use, is ethically and legally problematic. This reactive stance increases the likelihood of discovering significant privacy issues post-deployment, leading to costly remediation efforts, potential data breaches, and regulatory scrutiny. It violates the principle of data protection by design and by default, which emphasizes embedding privacy considerations early in the project lifecycle. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Identify the relevant regulatory framework, e.g., UK DPA 2018 GDPR. 2. Understand the specific data processing activities involved in the new technology implementation. 3. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment, including a DPA if necessary, to identify potential privacy risks. 4. Implement appropriate technical and organizational measures to mitigate identified risks. 5. Document all privacy-related decisions and actions for accountability. 6. Establish ongoing monitoring and review processes to ensure continued compliance. Question 17. The monitoring system demonstrates an alert indicating a potential unauthorized access vector to stored call recordings, which may contain personally identifiable information, PI. The alert suggests that specific user roles might have unintended visibility into these recordings. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action to address this potential compliance risk? Option A. Classify the alert as a low-priority issue and schedule a review of the access logs for the call recordings within the next business quarter. Option B. Proceed with implementing a broad network-level firewall rule to block all access to the call recording storage location, without further analysis of the specific access vector. Option C. Initiate a comprehensive investigation to confirm the scope of the PII exposure and the root cause, while simultaneously implementing temporary access restrictions to the affected recordings until the investigation is complete. Option D. Immediately disable the call recording feature across the entire collaboration platform to prevent any further potential PII exposure until a full security audit can be performed. The correct answer is C. Initiate a comprehensive investigation to confirm the scope of the PII exposure and the root cause, while simultaneously implementing temporary access restrictions to the affected recordings until the investigation is complete. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in collaboration application implementation, ensuring compliance with data privacy regulations while maintaining service functionality. The monitoring system's alert regarding potential PII exposure in call recordings necessitates immediate and careful action. The professional challenge lies in balancing the need to investigate and remediate the issue promptly with the requirement to adhere to data protection laws, which often dictate specific procedures for handling data breaches or potential breaches. Failure to act appropriately can lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. Complexity arises from understanding what constitutes PII in the context of call recordings, the scope of the exposure, and the appropriate technical and procedural steps for mitigation and reporting, all within the defined regulatory framework. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic investigation to confirm the PII exposure, followed by immediate technical remediation to prevent further unauthorized access or disclosure. This includes identifying the specific recordings affected, the nature of the PII involved, and the root cause of the exposure. Subsequently, implementing technical controls to secure the data, and if necessary, initiating a data breach notification process as mandated by the relevant regulations is crucial. This approach aligns with best professional practices by prioritizing data security and regulatory compliance. It demonstrates a proactive stance in identifying and mitigating risks, ensuring that the organization acts responsibly and transparently in handling sensitive information, thereby upholding legal obligations and ethical standards. Incorrect approaches analysis. Ignoring the alert or classifying it as a low-priority issue without proper investigation is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This demonstrates negligence in data protection responsibilities, potentially violating regulations that mandate timely response to security incidents involving PII. Such inaction could lead to unauthorized access, misuse of sensitive information, and severe legal repercussions. Disabling the call recording feature entirely without a thorough investigation into the root cause and potential impact is also an inappropriate response. While it might seem like a quick fix, it fails to address the underlying vulnerability and could disrupt essential business operations. Furthermore, it bypasses the necessary steps of data containment, analysis, and remediation, which are critical for compliance and for understanding the extent of the exposure. This approach lacks a structured, compliant problem-solving methodology, implementing a technical fix without documenting the investigation, the nature of the PII involved, and the remediation steps is professionally unsound. This omission hinders accountability, makes it difficult to demonstrate compliance to auditors or regulators, and prevents learning from the incident. It also fails to establish a clear audit trail, which is often a regulatory requirement for data handling and security incidents. Professional reasoning. Professionals faced with such a scenario should follow a structured incident response plan that prioritizes data protection and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Immediate acknowledgement and assessment of the alert. 2. Forming a cross-functional incident response team, including legal, IT security, and relevant application owners. 3. Conducting a thorough investigation to confirm the nature and scope of the PII exposure. 4. Implementing immediate technical and procedural controls to contain the exposure and prevent further incidents. 5. Documenting all findings, actions taken, and decisions made. 6. Assessing the need for regulatory notification based on the confirmed PII exposure and applicable laws. 7. Implementing long-term solutions to prevent recurrence. This methodical approach ensures that all legal and ethical obligations are met, while effectively resolving the technical issue. Question 18. Governance review demonstrates that the organization, which handles sensitive financial data, is implementing Cisco WebEx for internal and external collaboration. The review highlights a potential gap in ensuring that the platform's configurations strictly adhere to relevant U.S. federal regulations concerning data protection and auditability for financial institutions. The IT team is considering several approaches to address this, which approach best aligns with the regulatory framework and professional best practices for implementing Cisco WebEx in this context. Option A. Rely on the organization's existing general IT security policies to govern Cisco WebEx usage, assuming that these policies are sufficient to cover the specific requirements for financial data collaboration. Option B. Implement the most stringent security protocols available within Cisco WebEx, including disabling all external sharing capabilities and enforcing multi-factor authentication for every login, regardless of the sensitivity of the data being accessed. Option C. Deploy Cisco WebEx with default security settings, focusing primarily on ease of use and broad accessibility for all employees and external partners to maximize collaboration efficiency. Option D. Configure Cisco WebEx with end-to-end encryption for all meetings and messages, implement granular access controls based on user roles, and ensure comprehensive audit logging is enabled and retained according to financial industry standards for data integrity and regulatory compliance. The correct answer is D. Configure Cisco WebEx with end-to-end encryption for all meetings and messages, implement granular access controls based on user roles, and ensure comprehensive audit logging is enabled and retained according to financial industry standards for data integrity and regulatory compliance. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in implementing collaboration solutions, balancing the need for robust security and compliance with the user demand for seamless access and functionality. The challenge lies in interpreting and applying the specific requirements of the 300-810 CLICA exams regulatory framework, which in this context is assumed to be U.S. federal regulations pertaining to data privacy and security in a corporate environment. The organization must ensure that its chosen collaboration platform, Cisco Webex, adheres to these regulations without unduly hindering business operations. The complexity arises from the potential for misinterpretation of the regulations, leading to either overcompliance, impacting usability, or undercompliance, creating legal and security risks. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding of the specific U.S. federal regulations applicable to the organization's data, such as HIPAA for healthcare data or SOX for financial data, and how these regulations translate into technical controls within Cisco Webex. This means configuring features like end-to-end encryption, granular access controls, data retention policies, and audit logging in accordance with the identified regulatory mandates. Best professional practice dictates a risk-based approach, prioritizing compliance for sensitive data while ensuring that general collaboration features meet baseline security standards. This approach demonstrates due diligence, a core ethical and legal principle, by actively seeking to understand and implement mandated protections, thereby safeguarding sensitive information and avoiding potential penalties. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing a default, out-of-the-box configuration without specific regulatory review is a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This approach risks non-compliance with U.S. federal laws by failing to implement necessary security controls for protected data. For instance, if the organization handles protected health information, failing to enable end-to-end encryption or implement appropriate access controls would violate HIPAA. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize user convenience over all regulatory requirements. While user adoption is important, this can lead to the circumvention of critical security measures. For example, allowing unrestricted file sharing or broad guest access without proper vetting could expose sensitive data, violating data privacy regulations and potentially leading to breaches. This demonstrates a disregard for the organization's legal obligations and the trust placed in it by its stakeholders. Finally, implementing overly restrictive security measures that cripple essential business functions without a clear regulatory basis is also an incorrect approach. While security is paramount, it must be proportionate to the risks and aligned with specific regulatory mandates. Implementing unnecessary encryption for non-sensitive data or blocking all external collaboration without a justifiable reason can be seen as a failure to balance security with operational needs, potentially leading to inefficiencies and user frustration, and may not be directly mandated by any specific regulation. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic approach to implementing collaboration solutions. This involves 1. Identifying all applicable U.S. federal regulations based on the type of data handled and the industry. 2. Conducting a thorough risk assessment to understand potential vulnerabilities and the impact of non-compliance. 3. Mapping regulatory requirements to specific Cisco Webex features and configurations. 4. Implementing and testing these configurations to ensure they meet both security and functional needs. 5. Establishing ongoing monitoring and auditing processes to maintain compliance. 6. Regularly reviewing and updating configurations as regulations or business needs evolve. This structured decision-making process ensures that security and compliance are integrated from the outset, fostering a culture of responsible technology deployment. Question 19. The control framework reveals that the finance department requires immediate access to real-time collaboration tools for urgent transaction approvals, but the IT security team is concerned about potential data exfiltration and unauthorized access due to the sensitive nature of financial data. The IT security team proposes a strict network segmentation policy that isolates collaboration servers to a highly secured internal network segment, accessible only via VPN from specific authorized workstations. The finance department argues this will significantly delay critical approval processes and impact their ability to meet regulatory deadlines for financial reporting. What is the most appropriate approach to balance security and operational needs in this scenario? Option A. Implement the strict network segmentation as proposed by IT security, forcing all finance department users to connect via VPN from their workstations, and inform the finance department that any delays are a necessary consequence of adhering to security policies. Option B. Deploy the collaboration application solely on the finance department's existing, highly secured internal network segment, requiring all users to physically access this segment to utilize the tools, thereby ensuring maximum data isolation. Option C. Grant the finance department elevated privileges and bypass standard security protocols for their collaboration application access, prioritizing their immediate operational needs over potential security risks. Option D. Implement a zero-trust security model that includes strong identity and access management, multi-factor authentication for all access, granular access controls based on user roles and context, and end-to-end encryption for all collaboration traffic, allowing secure access from authorized devices and locations. The correct answer is D. Implement a zero-trust security model that includes strong identity and access management, multi-factor authentication for all access, granular access controls based on user roles and context, and end-to-end encryption for all collaboration traffic, allowing secure access from authorized devices and locations. Explanation. The control framework reveals a common challenge in implementing collaboration applications, balancing the need for robust security and compliance with the user demand for seamless, integrated communication experiences. In this scenario, the IT security team is prioritizing a strict, perimeter-based security model, which is a valid concern given the sensitive nature of corporate communications. However, this approach can inadvertently create friction with business units that require flexible access to collaboration tools from various devices and locations to maintain productivity. The professional challenge lies in navigating these competing priorities: security versus usability and business agility, while adhering to the regulatory landscape relevant to the 300-810 CLICA exam. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it adopts a risk-based, layered security strategy that aligns with modern security principles and regulatory expectations for data protection and privacy. By focusing on identity and access management, endpoint security, and secure communication protocols, it addresses potential vulnerabilities without completely hindering user productivity. This approach acknowledges that security is not a binary state but a continuous process of assessment and adaptation, crucial for maintaining compliance with data handling regulations and ensuring business continuity. It demonstrates an understanding of the shared responsibility model in security and fosters collaboration between IT and business units. An incorrect approach that solely relies on network segmentation without considering application-level security or user behavior analytics would be professionally unacceptable. This fails to address threats that may bypass network perimeters, such as compromised credentials or insider threats, and can lead to a poor user experience, potentially driving users to shadow IT solutions. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes user convenience over all security considerations, such as disabling encryption or multi-factor authentication for ease of access, would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This directly contravenes data protection laws that mandate the safeguarding of sensitive information and exposes the organization to severe data breaches, reputational damage, and legal penalties. A third incorrect approach that implements security controls without proper user training or communication would also be professionally deficient, leading to user frustration, non-compliance, and potential security gaps due to user error. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the business requirements and the regulatory obligations. This involves engaging with stakeholders from both IT security and business units to identify risks and define acceptable security postures. Implementing a phased rollout of security controls, coupled with comprehensive user education and ongoing monitoring, allows for adaptation and continuous improvement. Prioritizing solutions that offer both security and a positive user experience, and regularly reviewing and updating security policies based on evolving threats and regulatory changes are key to effective collaboration application implementation. Question 20. The efficiency study reveals a substantial increase in the adoption of Cisco WebEx messaging for internal communications. Given the organization's operations within the United States and its obligations under SEC and SOX regulations, which of the following configurations for Cisco WebEx messaging retention policies best ensures regulatory compliance and facilitates e-discovery? Option A. Configure Cisco WebEx messaging retention policies to align with the organization's legal and regulatory obligations, ensuring messages are retained for the legally mandated period and are accessible for e-discovery. Option B. Disable message retention in Cisco WebEx messaging to minimize storage costs and improve system performance. Option C. Rely on the default Cisco WebEx messaging retention settings, assuming they are sufficient for all regulatory requirements. Option D. Implement a Cisco WebEx messaging retention policy with a duration shorter than legally mandated to reduce data management complexity. The correct answer is A. Configure Cisco WebEx messaging retention policies to align with the organization's legal and regulatory obligations, ensuring messages are retained for the legally mandated period and are accessible for e-discovery. Explanation: the efficiency study reveals a significant increase in the use of Cisco WebEx messaging for internal communications across the organization. This shift, while boosting collaboration, raises concerns regarding data retention and e-discovery compliance, particularly within the context of the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission (SEC) regulations and the Sarbanes-Oxley Act (SOX). Organizations are legally obligated to retain certain business records, including electronic communications, for specified periods to facilitate regulatory oversight and potential legal proceedings. Failure to implement appropriate retention policies for ephemeral or rapidly changing data like instant messages can lead to severe penalties, including fines and reputational damage. The professionally challenging aspect of this scenario lies in balancing the benefits of real-time communication with the stringent requirements of regulatory compliance. IT administrators must proactively establish and enforce policies that ensure the integrity and accessibility of these communications without unduly hindering user productivity or creating excessive storage burdens. This requires a deep understanding of both the technical capabilities of the collaboration platform and the legal obligations of the organization. The correct approach involves configuring Cisco WebEx messaging retention policies in alignment with the organization's legal and regulatory obligations, specifically addressing SEC and SOX requirements. This means defining clear retention periods for messages, ensuring that data is stored securely and can be retrieved for e-discovery purposes when required. This proactive and compliant configuration represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the legal mandate for record retention and auditability, mitigating significant legal and financial risks. It demonstrates a commitment to regulatory adherence and responsible data management. An incorrect approach would be to rely solely on the default settings of Cisco WebEx messaging, which may not meet the organization's specific retention requirements. This failure to customize policies based on regulatory mandates is a significant ethical and regulatory lapse, as it exposes the organization to non-compliance. Another incorrect approach is to disable message retention entirely to reduce storage costs. This is a direct violation of SEC and SOX record-keeping requirements and carries substantial legal and financial repercussions. Finally, implementing a retention policy that is too short to meet legal obligations, even if a policy is in place, is also a failure. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence in understanding and applying the relevant regulations, leading to potential noncompliance and associated penalties. The professional decision-making process should involve a thorough assessment of applicable regulations, SEC, SOX, consultation with legal counsel to define specific retention requirements, and then the technical implementation of those requirements within the Cisco WebEx messaging platform. Regular audits and reviews of the retention policies and their effectiveness are also crucial to ensure ongoing compliance.